Welcome to the Talk of Tuckahoe. My name is Phil White, and we have a very interesting guest today. Her name is Cheryl Harding. Good morning, Cheryl.
Good morning, Mayor.
Cheryl is the former mayor of the village of Buchanan, and she presently serves as the administrative, what do we say, the administrative...
Well, it's either an administrative assistant or administrator of the workings of the Westchester Municipal Officials Association.
Okay, and you also have the same capacity with the Tri-County Village Officials Association.
That's correct. That's Nassau, Suffolk, and Westchester County.
And where you earn your living is from the Westchester 2000 as executive assistant.
That's correct, to Dr. Prezioso.
Good. Let's talk a little bit about Cheryl Harding, the person. Where were you born and raised, Cheryl?
I was born and raised in Buchanan, New York, which is where I live right now. Presently in the house I was raised in. It was my grandparents' home, so I've gone full circle back to where I started.
Great. Married? Children?
I have 2 children, both in college, which anyone who has children in college can understand. That's an interesting time as you try to get them headed in the right direction. So it's busy.
That's great. You got active in politics and was elected as mayor of Buchanan. And as I understand it, you were the first woman as mayor of the village?
I was the first woman, and to date the only woman mayor of Buchanan. I'm hopeful that we'll get some other women involved up there. But in 1980, a friend of yours, Mayor George Begani of Buchanan, contacted me and said that would I consider running for office. And I don't know if you've ever seen the movie Candidate, where Robert Redford sits at the end and he's won, and he says, "Now what do I do?" That's literally what happened to me, and I was elected as a trustee. I worked for 2 years under Mayor Begani, and Mayor Begani left office, and I worked for 2 years under Mayor Pierce and decided that this was something I really wanted to dig my heels into, ran for mayor, and was elected.
How did George convince you? Did he tell you it was only 2 meetings a month?
Exactly. 2 meetings a month, not a lot of work, just, and it's good for the community, and don't worry about it because you're so unknown, you probably won't win the election anyway. So there I was.
I think you were only the second mayor of any village in Westchester when you were elected. I think you were preceded probably by Marshall Lee in Bronxville.
Well, there's a few of them. Fran McEachran in Hastings, and of course Susie Oppenheimer in Mamaroneck was in office when I took office. So there were a number of us at that time. And of course now a lot of supervisors are women as well, so we have to keep that movement going a little.
Sure.
Not to get rid of all the men, just a few.
It's great seeing the fact that there are a number of women involved now, and it brings a different perspective to village politics. Tell us a little bit about your time in office as mayor. Anything interesting happened in Buchanan?
Well, it was an interesting time for me because I said earlier I found my home professionally. I found that government work and working for people and the difficulties in communities or the nice things was what I really wanted to do. When you're in office, you anticipate what's going to happen in your community and you try to safeguard. One of the things I worked very hard on with the County of Westchester was the mutual aid for police services, similar to the fire services, which we now have.
Well, let's give a little background on that because I don't think many people understand why that came about. Buchanan is a village up county on the coast of the Hudson, and it has one claim to fame. It has the Con Edison Atomic Energy Plant, which nicely enough pays 95% of your taxes.
It's been a marvelous neighbor and a marvelous part of our village for over 20-some years, and we all, appreciate it being there and the help they've given us.
And I got some nods from our videographer. We have Al Mariani, who is doing the taping today, and of course he is retired from Con Edison, and he'll agree with you. So what brought this on, the mutual aid?
Well, in 1978, there was a demonstration in our community. At that time, they were demonstrating about nuclear power and nuclear energy and certainly nuclear weapons as well, but it all gets tied in together sometimes, which is not really correct. And we had a force at the time of 5 police officers. And presently, at that point, there was not a mutual aid plan for police as there are with the fire department. So it became an emergency response situation where another chief came from outside of our community, was in charge of our community, and it just became not only very ineffective as far as our mayor at that time, who happened to be George Begani, felt, because the village lost control of its own future, so to speak, on that day that the demonstration was going on. So we
very expensive.
And very expensive, yes, because you paid for the outside officers in a lot of cases.
That time and a half.
Yes. So One of the things I looked into when I first was elected was trying to devise through the county a plan that would be similar to the fire department plan, where it's simply mutual aid. If I need you, you'll come in. If you need me, I'll come in. It took a lot of years, but it's in place, and I think it's important to all the communities in Westchester. Many of the small villages and towns don't have the police forces to cover things that sometimes happen. So
yeah, I know George at the time, George Buchanan, that is, at the time was very much concerned about what was going to happen to his budget that year.
absolutely.
Do you recall the amount that it cost you in overtime for those policemen?
I don't exactly, but I know it was over $300,000 for the entire bill, and it
Which was
that's
quite
substantial.
sizable.
That's substantial for a small community. We only had, at that point, we had 2,200. Unfortunately, we're down to 1,900 according to this year's census. So we're small. We're small, and we try to maintain ourselves, but sometimes outside forces, and certainly people have the right to come in and voice their opinion, so you cannot stop them from doing that. But it can be devastating to a small community.
I can imagine even $300,000 for a community our size, sizable, and we'd have to probably bond it to cover something, emergency like that.
Absolutely.
What's happening up in Buchanan these days?
Well, Buchanan has fortunately settled into a lovely little existence. It's, again, thanks to Con Edison, they're quite financially stable. Our mayor this year had a 0% tax increase, which I know probably most communities would like to go up and scream about him doing that. But again, I think when you have an industry in your community, you have to understand the benefits that it presents the community. So we're doing very well. We have a lot of recreational programs, and it's a nice place to live.
Even with the big taxpayer that you have there, I understand you had quite a time passing a bond issue for the new pool that you had.
Oh,
put
years
in.
ago, yes. Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Because I think what happens is sometimes, and we are an old community, Buchanan has been there, it was originally called Centerville and East Havistraw, or, you know, we've had a number of names. We ended up with Buchanan, I think, in the 1920s, but don't hold me to that, although my family would be yelling at this point because my great-uncle was the first mayor of Buchanan when it was formed. And we've had a lot of different names. So the people are old families, and I think that out of respect for the old families, when you do something, you have to make them aware of what you're doing and give them a lot of information. And perhaps the mistake we made was they didn't understand what the project was. And of course they thought it was going to be something horrible, and now they're all down there enjoying it. So it was defeated a couple of times, but then went through. Yeah.
One of the things that we do as public officials is we learn from the various communities some of the things that are going on. And when I first visited Buchanan, I noticed that your new village hall at that time was a converted school, and it got me thinking about what we could do here in Tuckahoe. Tell us a little bit about your village hall.
Our village hall was the Buchanan Elementary School. When I was a child, I went to school there, and prior to that, it was the Buchanan School, which went K through 12. And my grandfather graduated from there in 1916. So we had this beautiful old building, as looking at yours as I walked in here, you know how wonderful an old structure is, and it was set to be sold by the school district and demolished. And George Buchanan, again, very forward-thinking mayor, felt that perhaps the building could be renovated and used as our village offices. And it's much smaller than your building, as you know from being there, but it worked out beautifully and has been an asset to the community because we house everything under one roof, and we have expanded our senior citizen program and done different things like that because of having the space available.
Well, he did a great job with it, and it sort of prompted us to look at this building to do likewise. Let's talk a little bit about Westchester County Municipal Officials Association. How did you get started as its administrator?
Well, I left office as mayor, and I would love to say I left office by choice, but I did not. I was not reelected. And again, as I said earlier, I enjoyed that type of work so much. I felt kind of badly about not being able to be involved anymore. At that time, the administrator of the Municipal Officials Association was looking to slow down her pace a little bit, a wonderful person by the name of St. Clair Richard. And she said, well, maybe Cheryl can come in and help me out when we have to go on conferences, because that would be better for me. So I started that way. When she eventually retired, I took over the position, and in the, let's see, about 6 years I've been doing it now, the momentum of this association has grown enormously. Now, I know, Mayor, you were a big part of the organization of not only the beginning of this one when it really started taking hold, but also the Tri-County, which we're going to talk about later. And it's very nice to see something you've worked on develop into the organization it is today. We have all but one city, and as a matter of fact, it's a neighbor of yours, Mount Vernon, all but one city, and I think 4 towns in the northern corner of Westchester that are members, which gives you a big block of people and a big block of elected officials. And as you said earlier, you learn from other people's mistakes. As one of the most important things about this association, the networking that you can do if you see someone in a community having a project or making plans. You can say, well, how did that work? Did it work well, or do you think you wouldn't do that again? And it helps. We also do a lot of educational and informational things for our members. As you know, our meetings usually have some sort of topic which is timely for what's happening with our communities.
Well, you're doing a great job keeping it all together, and I really don't know how you do it.
Well, it's easy to do when you have good people to work with. This year we have Supervisor Dwyer from Bedford as our president, and of course an excellent executive committee of which you are a member. So when you have good people to work with and people are willing to give their time, it goes very easily.
Larry Dwyer is doing an exceptional job. You may not know it, but he used to be a principal of the Tuckahoe High School here.
Oh, no, I didn't know that.
Yeah,
okay. Well, I'm glad I said he was doing a good job. Somebody would have called him up and said, some lady said something terrible about you.
Oh, no, they all loved him when he was here.
Yeah.
All right, we talked about the Westchester County municipal officials, and we're constituted a little bit differently than the Tri-County village officials. We originally started out as the Westchester County village officials, and then we decided that we would speak with greater voice if we had the cities and towns in it. Now, the counties of Nassau and Suffolk didn't see it that way, but we still are united in our lobbying for the things that should be done for our communities.
Absolutely.
Tell us a little bit about the Tri-County village officials.
Well, I think before I get into that, the association is exactly, I think the reason there's a different attitude is, of course, in Nassau, I think there is a board of supervisors, which we used to have in Westchester until about 30 years ago, or 20 maybe, where the supervisors of each town is your board of legislators, as we presently have in Westchester. So
they have weighted voting there?
I'm not sure how the voting goes, but the villages feel they have no representation at all.
Okay.
Where in our county, the reason we have the board of legislators is because the villages felt then it would not be the supervisor. The supervisor had to go to this person as well as the mayor did.
Good point. I hadn't realized that.
That's why when you get into some of those counties in Long Island, you've mentioned supervisor, and they start to get a little concerned. Interesting part of that is because of the rotation of the chairmanship of that association. Larry Dwyer was the president of the Association for Tri-County Villages this year, and I have to say that he did a marvelous job. I mean, he went in there to almost a territory where they were looking to have a problem and handled it beautifully, so we had a good year with that as well. Tri-County is Nassau, Suffolk, and Westchester municipal officials. There's members of the executive committee are part of this association. And what we do is we put the 3 county populations and elected officials together and go up to Albany periodically and say, this is what you're doing. The big thing we've been working on this year, and you know, as mayor of a village as well, mandates are absolutely devastating to all of our communities. We are constantly mandated with things that are costly, and in some cases there's just no way they can do it. So it gives us, as you said before, when Westchester brought the cities and towns in, it was for a larger voice. The Tri-County Association gives us a larger voice when we go to Albany. When you have Nassau, Suffolk, and Westchester walking in a room, you got a lot of people.
Yeah, and they do listen to us. They're trying hard, and I've got to say our state legislators are under a lot of pressure from a lot of different groups. And,
absolutely.
So it's very difficult, but I think they like to see a little more input from us, and they are listening to us. Now, I know Sal Prezioso was very much interested in your background, and he was very happy to take you aboard his Westchester 2000. And many people have heard that term, Westchester 2000, and we're within 7.5 years of 2000. Let's talk a little bit about what the purpose of Westchester 2000 is, how it got started.
Well, in 1982 or 83, Dr. Prezioso was asked by the county executive to put together a group of task force to anticipate what the county should be looking at for the future of Westchester. The task force were comprised of a city, town village, 5 or 6 different groups, and their recommendations in the mid-'80s came out to that they felt representation could be better if there was a housing forum, an education coalition, a health and human services forum, ABIR, which is the Advisory Board for Intergovernmental Relations, which not only puts together the towns and the villages and the cities, but brings the county government into it as well and gives them a forum to sit down and discuss mutual problems. And I'm forgetting someone, and I don't know who it is. I'll get to them eventually. So these groups were put together with Westchester 2000 under Dr. Prezioso's direction, and the Westchester County Association is the co-sponsor of this. And it was a new idea. It was a private-public partnership, which means the county pays half of the funding and the Westchester County Association pays the other. They've become quite popular now, and Doctor likes to think that maybe we started that a little bit, and I say we because unfortunately I was not a part of it in the beginning, but I feel like it's home now. That people are looking into private-public partnerships as a way to cut the cost for any one area when they share it.
I know we're talking a great deal about cooperative agreements and also
Exactly.
consolidation. I know one of the big issues now is the consolidation of school districts.
What happened to our office as those groups were set up and they were ongoing, in 1991 the county executive, Andrew O'Rourke, asked Dr. Prezioso to do a new study on Westchester in the year 2000 and what the trends were showing and what people thought should happen to protect us. Dr. likes to use the word to form our own future and let it, instead of letting us form us, you know, because we have to do that. So again, he's marvelous at pulling in volunteers. We had over 300 people volunteer.
That's fantastic.
To sit down and give us their feelings on what they thought was wrong, if anything, with the county, and what they thought should be done about it. Now, this was again in '91. The committees were broken down into a county government committee, a sharing of functions, consolidation, school districts, and not-for-profits. And those committees came back at the end of the year with recommendations, and those recommendations varied. Some of them have been publicized, such as you're talking about with the consolidation of school districts. And we're presently now putting together a smaller group of what we call our professional people who are involved with those topics. For example, we have a wonderful group of volunteers who are CPAs from the Westchester chapter of the New York State Society of Certified Public Accountants. That's a mouthful, but that's what their title is. And they're from firms such as BDO Seidman, Ernst & Young, Bennett, Kielsen, Storch and Kremer, D'Arcangelo, and I think the other one is Canestra. And they are going over all of the ideas that came about from the first phase, which were the volunteers, because it's very easy to say, well, I think it would be a good idea if we did this. But in some cases, consolidation might not be cost effective. It might cause you more problems than it does before you do it. Also, the other thing that you have to keep in mind is the quality of life in Westchester. One of the reasons people like to live in this county is that you live a good life in most cases. You have the services you need, the facilities you need are available, and you can't change that either. So keeping those two things in mind, efficiency and economy, but also the quality of life for the residents, were really the goals of this Governments at the Crossroads study.
Yeah, last week we had a conference there at Pace University, and represented there, of course, with the school districts and the fire departments and a few others. Maybe you might want to some of the things that were voiced there. I know education was a big thing.
Well, it is a big thing because, as we said that day, we had a marvelous representative, the president of the School Boards Association in Westchester, and he's a brilliant man, and I've talked to him before, and his thoughts are good and clear. But when we released the first part of this report, the thing that we found interesting was the municipalities were willing to start looking at themselves. And as you know, Mayor, a lot of the municipalities in our Westchester County Association are now starting to share services, and some of them have been doing it for years. And we have one community up in the northern end of Westchester, the village of Ossining and the town of Ossining, that are really digging their heels in and doing that. The one group of people who really did not respond and said there's no way we can do that, we need more tax dollars, were the school districts. And basically all we've asked them to do is, well, just don't tell us you need more money. Take a look at yourself. Find a way to evaluate yourself. If you evaluate yourself afterwards and say, well, there is no way I can do this, fine, but they haven't to date been willing to do that. I think one of the things that came away from that meeting on the 12th that you're talking about is that they realized that everyone else had been willing to do it, so they better do that mirrored look, as Dr. Prezioso says, as well.
I did pick on education because population projections for the year 2000 indicate that our Westchester population is becoming more diverse. A greater percentage is going to be immigrant.
That's true.
Greater percentage minority, and education is really at the basis of our future growth.
Absolutely.
And I know many corporations will either locate in an area or not, depending upon the labor, the training of the labor pool.
That's true, because they're all having a problem with that. Most of the companies that are involved in the Education Coalition that I mentioned before are involved with the Education Coalition out of Westchester 2000 because they feel that it's a pressing need to get these kids or young adults out of school, trained properly, so that they have the workforce they need in Westchester County. But the other side of that is our young adults can't afford to live in Westchester County today.
Which brings us to the problem of housing.
There we go. So, you know, it's almost overwhelming when you sit there and you say, well, what can we do about this? And the thing that Dr. Prezioso's report, and I think everything he says, is let's not keep sitting here saying, what can we do about this? Let's find something to do. We have to right now, or it's going to be mandated on us by a higher power. An example of that is that the governor has now put together a committee, and Tom Sobel out of Albany, asking for recommendations, what they feel these models would best present to Westchester County school districts. The models that they are giving them to consider is every school district must have 1,200 residents, every school district must have 2,500 residents, or every school district must have 5,000 students. Well, that's quite a mandate. Depending on what one they decide is the way to go, I can think of a number of school districts in Westchester County who do not have even 1,200, and that's the minimum at this point. So you know they're going to be somehow mandated to consolidate with another school district.
You would think it would be logical to start small and then work your way up. And I know one of the problems voiced up county was that the population was so spread out that it would be uneconomical to bus students an hour and a half to a school district.
And that was the time they put on it. They felt that a student could be on a bus an hour and a half, and I know a lot of people are not going to like that. But it almost proves my point that if the school districts had been willing to look at themselves a little more closer when we started this a year ago, maybe the governor and the Board of Regents and the Department of Education wouldn't come down with 3 models that now they're going to have to work with. So again, it's almost protection of ourselves to anticipate where the problems are going to be and work on them with our own solution rather than someone else's.
I also happened to be present about a week and a half ago when they discussed housing, affordable housing, and they all asked, I think the Westchester 2000 group asked for input from the various communities. Would you want to talk a little bit about that?
Well, our housing forum is run by Joe Zalek, who is also an ex-mayor. There's a lot of ex-mayors out there. Joe was the...
a recycled mayor.
Recycled mayor, that's good. He is the past mayor of Portchester. And he is the head of our housing forum, and Kim Jacobs is the head of the housing fund. Now, the housing forum is really an advocate for affordable housing, and they go into communities and they work with them to try to help them, again, put it in the way they want to do it rather than forcing anything on them. And he's been quite successful. I know the input he gets from the communities has been positive.
Are we talking now about new housing, existing housing, rehab housing?
In Joe's case, it's usually new projects. I mean, I'm not positive of that, but I know the projects I've seen him working on since I've been involved with Westchester 2000 are new. Now, in the Housing Fund, which is Kim Jacobs, she's involved with a lot of renovations. What has happened over the years, there have been a lot of groups that are interested in renovating old properties and turning them into affordable housing, but as you apply for a grant or a loan from DHCR for the housing program, it takes so long for that grant to trickle down to the actual project that a lot of the projects were going under or not happening. So the Housing fund was put together to loan the money to the project so it could get going, and then when the DHCR funds came down, they could repay them. And it has produced a number of beautiful renovations. I attended an opening about 2 weeks ago up in Peekskill of a lovely old home that had been renovated under that program, and it's just breathtaking. They restored it back to its old grace and charm, and there are now 3 families living in it, all working families with 3 to 4 children each, and it's quite a nice thing to see.
Where are we going now with Westchester 2000? I know these studies have been done. Are they going to apply more pressure on the communities to work up some of these recommendations?
I don't think Dr. Prezioso's goal is to apply pressure. What he always likes to say is he likes to stimulate and motivate, and I think the thing he's looking to do is give all of the elected officials and taxpayers in the county the options that are available. And then it's certainly up to each individual community what they feel will work with their community. I don't think he's going to say, well, you know, this is what you must do. It will be a recommendation to be considered. Now, the county executive, talking about Westchester 2000's future, at our last meeting with him a few months ago, said that he was going to wait until this study was done. And by the way, our study, the final report, won't be out until 1993. And then he was going to assign Dr. Prezioso to Westchester 3000, and he could start all over again. So I think that the private-public partnership has been something that has been so successful that they're probably going to just continue to use it, because the contact with the residents and taxpayers and businesses is something so essential to the success of any of these things.
You mentioned earlier ABIR, and I attended the last meeting up at the county center. And why don't you tell us a little bit about what ABIR is all about, and maybe some of the items that were on that program. I'd love to be able to get a tape of that and play it locally.
Yes, I know. I'm trying to do that myself, because I know it was taped, but we haven't been able to locate the cameraman yet, so we're having a problem. I think he disappeared. But the Advisory Board for Intergovernmental Relations was spun off from that original task force, as I mentioned, in the early 80s, and it puts the towns, villages, cities, and county government at a table about this size to discuss what's happening in mutual concerns. The president this year is Jim Duty, the supervisor of Eastchester. And Jim has been working very closely with our office and with the municipal associations, the Supervisors Association, which is Joanne Simon, the supervisor of Lewisboro, and Larry Dwyer, who of course is the president of the Municipal Officials Association, and trying to pull together issues. The county executive's office has been very responsive to the needs and the concerns this year. We've put together a show a month and a half ago, as you said, of mandates, and again, because mandates are really looming over our heads, and one of the topics was the Medicaid proposal by the governor, and what difference it will make to Westchester County, and the fact that it will be taking a great financial load off the county taxpayers by giving it back to the state. The other was the Wicks law, which I don't know how familiar people are of the Wicks law. But
we're very much concerned about it here in our community, because we have a huge expansion at the Tuckahoe School District.
All right.
And they know it's going to cost them at least 10 or 15% more, because they have to adhere to the provisions of the Wicks law.
Okay, well, you know, it's been an interesting year for the Wicks law, as you probably know, Mayor. We were in Albany in February listening to the governor speak, and he assured us that he was going to do something about the Wicks law this year, and if it didn't happen, go back to our local people, and by local people I mean our local representatives in Albany, and say, hey, how come you didn't do this? But that's where it stopped. Nobody did anything. So we were very excited that this was maybe the year we were going to get that repealed, because as you know, the Wicks law has been a legislative priority for the Municipal Officials Association. I've been involved since 1980, so I'm saying 12
Prior
years.
to that, too.
And I'm sure. So we're really hoping that perhaps this will move ahead in the near future, because there are so many people that are now understanding the increase in cost because of it.
I think we're only one of 2 states in the entire country
That has it,
that has it.
exactly. And Commissioner Plotkin did the presentation on the Wicks law that night, and he is the Public Works Commissioner of Westchester County, and he is a big advocate of having that repealed. So
we saw Commissioner Plotkin up at the dedication of the new jail yesterday. And
oh, yes.
Well, that's a beautiful job up
is
there.
it? I haven't seen it yet.
Yeah.
I don't want to see it too soon. I mean, I don't know. But,
Only as a visitor.
Yes. The other was the certiorari problems we're all having, the small claims, the tax assessments. They've become a major issue in villages and towns this year. A lot of them have been hit with enormous costs because of the small claims. As you know, one of the recommendations is that we go to countywide assessment, which means that whomever would assess the entire county so that we would be at a normal level. Well, there are a lot of people who don't like that idea too much, and rightfully so. Many communities have not been assessed for many years, and when you reassess, there's a potential that it's going to increase.
I think that's the danger, that we're going to be forced into a reassessment, mainly because the equalization rate
That's exactly right.
becomes less and less each year. I think the village of Tuckahoe is somewhere between 5 and 6%. So in a few years, we don't know what's going to happen, but something has to happen.
Well, that's it, and again, sometimes it's not a difficult decision. I mean, it is a difficult decision, but it's an even more difficult pill to swallow. You know, countywide assessment is needed. We've had many people talk about it, but it's not going to be an easy thing to accomplish. And it's also costly.
And many public officials consider it as political suicide.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I know at one meeting we went to, and this was brought up as a possible solution, they said that the only people that would even consider it would be people going out of office. Although we do have communities that have done it recently, and surprisingly enough, it was not a political issue. The community realized, again, this goes back to what Dr. Prezioso always said, educating, and by educating it certainly doesn't mean you have to spoon feed them, but letting your residents know exactly what's going on is the key. It's like your show here. You're letting your people know exactly what's happening in Tuckahoe. And if they know what's happening and they understand what it means to them, either tax-wise or service-wise, with those options, if we do A, you lose this. If we do B, we maintain it. You know, then they're willing to back you up when you have to make a hard decision. I think most times that happens.
Now, we've been talking about Westchester 2000, and you're located where, your office?
We're in the county office building on 148 Martine Avenue in White Plains.
And what floor is that?
Well, we're on the 7th floor right now, but the county is renovating because they have to get more people into one building, so I don't know where we're going to end up.
Now, if some of our taxpayer organizations wanted to get in touch with you, how might they do it to get information and...
Well, we have a lot of information available. Unfortunately, our Government's at the Crossroads, the original study we've had printed 3 times, and it has been totally taken all 3 times. And we are, again, not-for-profit, so in order to have it printed again, we have to get some funding. But we have a lot of information on the Westchester 2000 program itself, and also on some other studies we've been doing, and Dr. Prezioso's report to the local governments at the June 12th program you spoke about is also available as well. Our number is 285-2882, and that's Dr. Prezioso's office, Westchester 2000, and we love to have people call and talk to us. We also like to hear what they think about what's going on in the county as well.
That's great, because I think it's something that our civic and organizations, as well as our taxpayer groups, should know a little bit more about it. There's only so much information that can be gotten indirectly, if you will, but if they take the interest in it and actually be the spur to some of these changes.
Absolutely.
Because that's where it has to come from, the grassroots.
It absolutely does, and that's why I'm saying the more the people understand what is happening in the county today and why it's happening, the better off we're all going to be, because that's our strength. The people that we represent are our strength. So.
That's great. We've been talking to Cheryl Harding, the former mayor of the village of Buchanan. She presently serves as the administrator for the Westchester County Municipal Officials Association. She also has the chore of being the administrator of the Tri-County Village Officials Association, and she is also the executive assistant for Westchester 2000. And you've sort of been an inspiration to many women around the county for the public service that you've given to your community, as well as to the number of other responsible positions that you hold. And it's been our pleasure here to talk to you this morning, and I want to thank you again for coming out It's tough to get you away from your office. I know there's so much going on there, but again, my thanks to you and to Sal Prezioso.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.